Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I am your host, Dr. Heidi Horsley, and I am here today flying solo because my mom is not with me, but we are going to have some great guests, and one of them is my sister, and the other two have been on many, many times. So we are going to be talking today about grief release, transforming grief through creative expression. I kind of don't know what that is, but I'm going to find out from our guests who do know what it is and who have totally transformed their grief, and that they use creative expression often. So I'm going to start by introducing them. Right next to me is my sister, Rebecca Horsley Bara, and she now works with me at Open to Hope and is the president of the Open to Hope Foundation. Her brother, Scott, and my brother, our brother, Scott and cousin Matthew died together in a car accident when they were 17 years old. Rebecca holds a master's degree in transpersonal psychology and is currently pursuing her PhD. She is a yoga instructor and holistic health coach, and she serves as a trustee on the Compassionate Friends Foundation Board and as an emeritus board member for the Art of Yoga Project. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Little sis is here. Okay. Next to her is someone that's been on our show many times, Jason Wendroff-Rawnicki, and I finally got his last name down.
It only took you a couple of years, but
probably about 10, exactly. So Jason is a somatic grief therapist. He's an author and a certified yoga educator. He has a master's degree in psychology from Columbia University. His sister Lauren died in a car accident when she was just 24 years old. Jason started Sibs Online, a weekly peer support group for bereaved siblings, and is featured in the book Faces of Grief, which I have next to me. And then right next to Jason is Jordon Ferber.
Hello there.
Jordon, again, has also been on our show many times.
But who's counting?
Yeah, exactly. Who's counting? Jordon is a comedian, podcaster, and public speaker. His brother Russell was killed in a car accident at 21 years old. Jordon hosts the popular podcast, Where's the Grief? It's awesome. Listen to the show that I was on with it, the podcast he did with me. It's great. Jordon also facilitates a support group for bereaved siblings with the Compassionate Friends. And his family runs the Russell Ferber Foundation, which provides scholarships to the Culinary Institute of America and produces a yearly comedy benefit show.
Yeah.
In June, in the Village.
Yep. Very exciting. Coming up on our 20th year.
Coming up on the 20th year. It's wonderful. If you are in New York, go. He gets the best comedians. And you do it in the school that you and Russell went to, right?
Yeah, we do it at the elementary school that Russell and I both went to. And we have a fund there as well. And yes, an amazing place to be able to go back to every year. It definitely feels like coming home every year, you know?
Yeah, I love that you do it at that venue. And you get the best people, and you've got the Grand Daisy Bakery food.
Yep, Grand Daisy Bakery has been our sponsor since our second year, for 19 years, provides all the catering. Jeremy's Ale House provides all of our beer and wine and sodas and whatnot.
I love it.
And then all of our scholars, who are all pastry chefs, they all bake stuff, bring to our event. Last year, one of our scholars made a hazelnut babka.
Love it.
It's delicious.
And I love seeing the scholars come on stage.
Yeah.
And knowing that Russell is part of their success because through this foundation, which is amazing. So, okay, I guess I want to start a little bit different. I want you all to tell a little bit about your story of loss, and then we'll move to how you ended up being able to eventually transform your grief through creative expression. So, Rebecca, do you want to start?
Yeah, so my brother Scott and my cousin Matthew were killed in a car accident. They were 17, I was 19 at the time, and I was a college student. And after my brother's death, I went back to school and tried to resume my life as a normal college student. Yet nothing was normal. My life was turned upside down, obviously, having lost my brother, and I was dealing with this new feeling, this new thing called grief. And I didn't know how to do it. I wanted to be like the rest of the kids, yet I was sad and in shock. And so I tried therapy and grief groups, and nothing helped. And so what I would do is I would drive my car up to the mountains, and I would find a secluded spot, and I would scream and cry and ask God, why did my brother have to die? And then I would go back and resume my life as a normal college student.
And I had no idea you were doing that.
Yeah, and my sister was there with me at school. She was a year older, and I just decided to grieve alone and in silence. And to everyone, all my peers, I looked like everything was great. I was fine. I was dealing with my brother's death, and I just was shoving it all in, except for when it got too intense, finding a place to let it out as much as I could. And then going back and pulling myself together and continuing with my life.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And Jason?
So I feel that my story is very similar, and I can't disconnect the creative expression from how I learned to deal with my grief. In 1998, when Lauren died in a car accident, she was 24, I was 26. I was going for I was in the process of getting my master's at Columbia with the plan of going on for a clinical PhD. And then as soon as that happened, I realized that talk therapy wasn't going to be the cure-all for me. Like I understood the theory of talk therapy, I understood the practice of it, but it wasn't getting to the root of what was going on with my grief. I was practicing yoga before she passed, and that was making a huge impact in my life. The movement, the creative expression by using my body, that's what was really starting to make the difference. And that started to happen actually before she died, but then when she died, like the whole cosmic part of yoga made a lot more sense to me. And so I dove deeply into my yoga practice. I eventually became a yoga instructor, and then realized how that was helping me deal with my grief through movement, through expression, other than words. Because words only get to a certain part, and then they kind of fail a little bit. So, and what I'm realizing is that the grief was living in my body, and when I could learn to find ways of getting it out, then I was feeling so much better and making so much more progress, not just in my grief, but in my life.
Well, it's interesting because I am in private practice as a psychologist, and I hear this because I only know talk therapy.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I hear my clients say that have had losses, because most of them have, Heidi, this is only working to a certain, I feel like I've hit a ceiling.
Yes.
And it's I need something more. I need something, like you said, creatively with my body, et cetera. So we're going to talk more about what everybody does here.
Yep.
And so thank you for sharing that. So Jordon, what about you?
Yeah, so I was 24 when Russell was killed in a car accident at 21. I had already been doing comedy for about a year and a half. I had kind of decided when I was 9 years old that I wanted to do stand-up comedy, so I had kind of spent my whole life preparing for that. I had been doing it for about a year and a half. Russell was just a couple of months shy of graduating from the Culinary Institute of America with a degree in the pastry baking arts program. And yeah, it threw my whole world upside down. I felt like I was living a double life for a while, even though I found a lot of camaraderie amongst other comedians who might not have gone through a similar kind of loss, but that had definitely gone through issues and were struggling with certain mental health aspects of their mental health, or with substance abuse. And there was a lot of camaraderie of honesty off stage, of being able to sort of have other colleagues that were a little messed up as well. Like I wasn't the only one that was dealing with heavier issues. And it took a while before I was really comfortable talking about any of it on stage. It took me it was actually really helpful in those first few years to not talk about it on stage, to have a whole area of my life where all I did was write jokes about things that were totally disassociated from the experience I was actually going through. It was really helpful to have that break. But over time, I have found it very helpful to incorporate a lot of it into my material, but also just have other venues and other platforms, you know, my podcast and within my sibling support group, to be able to find humor in the darkest parts of this experience. I find that being able to make jokes and laugh about some of this stuff with other people that are going through something similar is healing, because it makes us feel less alone. Certainly brings, you know, I feel it brings people together. And a lot of times you don't even have to make a profound statement of any kind. Just that laugh of recognition that we have been through a similar thing, and that it's kind of crazy that nobody really lets you talk about it anywhere. It's refreshing to have places where you can laugh about it and cry about it in the same breath, really.
Well, what's interesting here today is that all of us have had traumatic sudden deaths in car accidents. And so there's a trauma piece of that we don't dive into, and we're not going to dive into it here because I don't want to traumatize people out there listening with the details. We each have details about our siblings dying. And there were traumatic details, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, that's not. It's really also not a story I tell with frequency.
well,
you know.
exactly.
The circumstances of Russell's death, to me, are not a part of his life. That's
Exactly.
not the way he died is not indicative of anything that relates to who he was.
Yeah.
So, for some reason, that's one of the questions that people want to know when you meet somebody. Oh, I lost my brother. They're like, oh, well, how did it happen? And I tell those people, that's not a part of the conversation for me. If you want to talk about his life, I got all day, but I have no interest really in talking about his death.
Yep. I guess I'm wondering, since we've had the traumatic sudden death piece, how did you all start to feel like, okay, you know what, I'm feeling like I'm a little bit getting in a better place, or I'm shifting, my energy shifting, something's happening. I mean, what did you do?
Well, so if I look at the creative expression piece of all this, I mean, I always have been physically active, and I've always liked to exercise and do various workouts. But when I've really put all this together of the importance of creative expression, releasing grief in my body, it really didn't happen until recently. Fast forward, my brother dies, and 30 plus years later, my father died of a staph infection. And all that grief that I'd had shoved down in my body from the death of my brother at 19, it started to resurface.
Interesting.
And I felt like, at the time, I was like in this really dark place, like at the bottom of a dark well, and I didn't want to see the light. I didn't want to come out of the darkness. And then finally one day I said, it's time to get back up again. And so I went outside for a walk, and right away I felt better. And I was like, wait a minute, I have these tools that I was a long-term time yoga practitioner and a meditator, and I'm like, I have these tools, yet I'm not using them. I didn't feel like I was ready. And so I started practicing yoga again, and right away I felt better. And so I was like, wait a minute, there's something to this. Being out in nature, moving my body. I started to meditate again, to get out of all the swirling thoughts and like get into my heart and my gut and like what's going on internally outside of my thinking mind. And then I started grad school in transpersonal psychology, the psychology of mind, body, spirit. And I was asked to do a lot of writing and poetry and art and look at my dreams. And everything was around my grief, everything. And every time I created, I felt better. I felt lighter. I felt this release in my body. Whereas talking about it, again, like Jason, it didn't work for me. I didn't want to talk about it. I would talk about it and people would look horrified when I told them the story of my brother's death or how old I was, just scared. And so for me to get that grief out of my body, I had to use these various creative expression techniques. And that's been really, really helpful in this journey.
For me, it was not immediate. It took me a little while because I felt myself stuffing things down. And just like for being a bereaved sibling, we get these messages of you have to be strong for your parents and all the. And so it took me a while to validate my own grief, and I needed to validate it for myself. But once I did, I was like, oh, if I don't take care of myself, I'm going to go down like I was overweight, I wasn't healthy, I was eating too much, drinking too much. And all of a sudden, I'm like, if I want my story to change, if I don't want to go down that road of illness, I need to do things differently. And so it lit a fire under my rear to really start to focus on my health and wellness and my fitness. And the more I did that, the better my body felt, the more my mind was able to deal with all of those racing thoughts and those overwhelming feelings, because a healthy body creates a healthy mind, and it's easier then to deal with all of that other stuff. And for me, it was through physicality, but I've started writing and telling my story. So in the book Faces of Grief, I tell my story because it's important to get those things out, not just to now help myself, but then to help others and serve others.
Yeah, 100%. It's really all about getting out of your own head.
Yeah.
You're right, no, that's what it is, because so much of the grief process is so isolating. Yeah. And especially as you go through it, nobody wants to talk about it. I find that finding ways to talk about it in a way that normalizes the experience. We all go through it. It's an inevitability that we will all lose people. The fact that we don't talk about it puts us more in our own head. We all question our process. Am I doing this properly? Am I doing this healthily? Am I, am I holding myself back by continually thinking about this stuff? getting it out of our head, for me, it's like being more public about it, is just, it was revelatory to me how much I was able to like make sure that first of all, I have so much power to dictate how those conversations go. In the beginning, it's so hard to realize that we really can dictate the flow of that conversation all the time. It feels like a lot of times, it's like emotional landmines that we either step in or set up for other people to step on. I think it's helpful to recognize that this stuff is normal. Yeah. And being able to be open about it, I think it makes the whole process of feeling less alone in our grief and more normal about it. It's so hard to find things that work. And even when you find things that work, you still second guess yourself. So it's nice to have a place where you can at least laugh about the things that didn't work.
So Jordon, initially you weren't incorporating the grief into your comedy as much, right?
Yeah, it took me a long time. Well, because I find that,
that makes sense.
I didn't want to force any of the jokes, I feel like the great thing about comedy is that you can talk about anything.
Right.
There are no topics that are off limits. If it's a heavy topic, you have to make the joke really good. The joke has to be as funny as it is heavy. You have to. I think you have to respect the level of what it is that you're talking about. But
so did you just feel like, okay, I'm ready now to kind of start incorporating it?
It didn't happen like that. I was thinking about it, but it's not until I really found a joke or a couple of lines that popped into my head, and I started doing them. And I'm still struggling with expanding that material, but. And not every audience is open to it as well.
Well, you've done a great job doing that, and you've also done it in your keynotes, because you'll make them, will laugh and will be sad. I mean, you do a nice balance of incorporating humor into it.
Yeah, I try to keep it as a little bit lighter in my comedy act when I'm performing for civilians that haven't gone through a loss or that didn't sign up to see somebody tell jokes about loss.
Yeah.
This makes sense.
But I've been working on a piece now that I'm really happy with about how I love doing stand-up comedy because it feels like the only place that you can openly talk about mental health issues. It's like nobody wants to hear it unless they think you're joking.
Pretty much.
So, but it is I think really helpful for other people to hear and talk about this stuff, even if it is uncomfortable in the moment. I think upon reflection, comedy is always also about perspective. It helps change perspective. Taking a really heavy or difficult topic and just shifting your perspective to a way that lets you mock or take the power away from what is otherwise a debilitating experience or a thing that makes you feel small or alone. Taking your own power back and realizing that, no, I have so much power. I have so much so much life, coursing through my veins. Like I have so much. I feel like that is one of the things that comes out of a lot of that.
So I'm wondering, for people watching that really want to be creative, like where can they start? What can they do?
So I love that question because I was just thinking that because we do yoga and Jordon does comedy, that's maybe not accessible to everyone.
And people get scared about the word yoga.
Or
they intimidate. I'm not flexible.
They think I can't stand on my head. I can't do back.
Or they say they're not flexible.
Or some people bend over backwards not to do yoga.
But even the like creative expression, like it can be so general. Like for me, it's anything that expresses itself. So it could be cooking, right? So I love to cook, and and that's really what serves my health, and it's brings me great joy. Dancing is another thing. So putting on a song, I do sometimes about 4-minute dance breaks where I'll turn on a song and just dance around the room. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be even structured in any way, shape, or form. It could be going for a walk. It could be spending that time in nature. So the simpler you keep it, it could be painting or journaling, or there's so many things that are so accessible that you don't need anything but yourself to do.
Yeah, and I would say to get out of your head about it, like and write for yourself or paint for yourself, or don't paint for others where you have to present. Look at the painting I did. Like, and I talk about this, I have a workshop called Grief Release, using creative expression to move grief through your body. And the ask is to get out of the thinking mind and write from here or from here, like from your gut. Like, and at first people are like, questioning them, like, don't go here or here. And I would say, whatever comes up for you to create from here. Like, what is moving you, and get out of your head that, well, I'm not an artist, or I'm not a writer, or I'm not a dancer, or a chef, or a comedian, whatever the things. get out of your head, get out of your own way, and just let it come through you and come out, and you'll be surprised what you come up with. Again, like getting out of like what would you gravitate towards if someone told you couldn't do something? What would you do?
Even yoga. I mean, yoga can be getting down on the ground and stretching.
Absolutely.
People think it has to be this elaborate thing. It doesn't.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And even within our bereaved sibling community, the online community, we have a couple of groups. One, we have a writing group where we have someone who gives you guided prompts, and you just write down, whatever comes up for you. And we also have just like kind of like an arts and crafts meeting where it's just a group of siblings getting together and coloring or painting or doing or drawing or cooking, whatever you feel is a creative expression for you. And then they just do it in community with each other, so that this way everyone's encouraging each other just to find that thing that works for them, because not every type of creative expression will work for everybody. So,
is there anything that people can do like now? I mean, something small and easy if they're watching?
Well, they could even just like reach their arms overhead and stretch and just stretch,
Come
like
on,
move side to
Jordon.
side.
Jordon, let's get
Maybe or,
I like that.
or just like shake your arms or shake your legs or
Yeah.
just like get out of your own way. Like,
Yeah.
get out
Do
of
the
your
hokey
own
pokey.
way.
Yeah.
Do the
That's what
hokey
it's all about,
pokey.
right?
That's what life is all about.
Exactly. And have fun with it and get
Yeah.
out of your own way and just you'll feel a little better.
Yeah.
I like this. So if you had to give people one piece of advice that have had traumatic losses like we have, what would you say?
I would say that discover what works for you. They're going to get a lot of, go to, like, because I was a college student at the time and my mother was concerned, I was 2,000 miles away, am I grieving, am I getting support in my grief, and go to this therapist. So, people are telling me like what, and those things didn't work for me. I realized early on, those don't work for me. And so like deal with your grief in the way that feels best for you and feels most authentic to you, and it will be different. And at different times of your life, different things will be helpful. So just really understanding what it is that you need and getting away from what everyone else wants for you.
I like that.
Yeah, and on that sort of similar note, I would say try different things, right? Like you don't know unless you try stuff. And so try a variety of different things. So try dancing, try writing, try coloring, and just keep trying until you find intuitively what is going to serve you. And so just keep trying different things until you find something that works.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to open up to people about what your needs are and what your process is or what you're doing. I think it's refreshing to be able to connect with people about what you're trying to do or where your shortcomings are. I think so many of us are afraid of being vulnerable or afraid of showing weakness in any way. But honestly, I think that asking for help or looking for connections, like these are signs of strength. Yeah. Strength in numbers, strength in knowing that we're on the right path. As long as you're not hurting yourself or anyone around you, however you're doing it is how you're doing it. And it's helpful to express it to other people around you so that you can feel like there's, that recognition of, oh my God, I'm not alone for the first time.
I like that.
And I think that's also the benefit of finding your support group, whether it's a bereaved sibling support group or a child loss or whatever support group, because then you can ask for recommendations even. So like you can talk to people who have found things that have worked for them. And so in that like trying, you have more variety of things to try and go for. So.
And what's great nowadays is there's the internet.
Yeah.
When our siblings died, there was no internet. And so we were sort of hanging out there alone. I remember looking around for someone who could relate to me, and I didn't find it other than my sister. But we were both struggling with our own grief. So there is so much available online.
And as you said that, I'm even thinking you could actually use AI too. You can go to ChatGPT and type in, I'm grieving,
Yes,
I want to try some creative expression, what could I try?
can I do?
And
Totally.
ChatGPT will spit out 100
Absolutely.
different, 100
Wow.
different options. Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Grief GPT.
Exactly.
Grief GPT, there you go, Jordan.
Exactly. I actually have a student that my sister just met, and she started something called Fastling on ChatGPT, which is a chat therapist.
Oh. But maybe that's an idea
created
for
it.
Open to Hope, because you could do a closed loop AI with all grief material and download all the Open to Hope material, and then someone could come in and type in, and it'll all be grief related. So just
Heidi, as a therapist, how does that make you feel?
I like that. I know, right? I'm no longer needed because we've got bots. Exactly. Scary.
Yeah.
So where can people find you if they need to, if they're watching and they want to reach out?
So they can find me at the Open to Hope Foundation. I am work for our family foundation, and also I'm on all social media, Rebecca H. Bara.
Yeah. And for me, you could find me on my website at www.somaticgrieftherapy.com. You could connect with my social or on Facebook, IG, and TikTok. You can also pre-order Faces of Grief, as well as connect with me there. I have a ton of different things on my website as free resources. And also my bereaved sibling peer support group is there too.
Yeah, you can find all my stuff at Where's the Grief. Where'sTheGrief.com is my podcast, and I perform pretty regularly here in New York City. I don't post my schedule with the frequency that I should, but I perform fairly regularly at the all-new Comedy Village on West 44th Street. So you can check out their website and come see some comedy.
Okay, so we still have about a couple minutes.
One more thing to
Yes.
add. I forgot. So my grief release, I've created a workshop called Grief Release, using creative expression to move grief through your body, and I'm teaching it sort of at local yoga studios and grief conferences. And I taught it this past summer at a grief conference at the Compassionate Friends.
Yes.
And it was recorded, so it will be up on the Open to Hope website. So people are going to be welcome to experience the workshop via Open to Hope.
I love that. I definitely want to experience it because I don't know what you did. But I know that Jason was
Jason was there.
I know that Jason was supervised you.
Jason was my supervisor, and so he was able to view it and give me feedback, and it was wonderful.
Yeah, it
wonderful.
was such a great experience for me too, just to see how you progressed and how you got even more comfortable talking about Scott and your story and your grief. I think you did it so eloquently here on this show, and I really feel that that was a reflection of the work that we did together.
Absolutely, yes, it was. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just end with a joke, I guess.
Go for it, Jordon.
I mean, I tell people all, as I say, this grief stuff is always hard to talk about, but I do tell people all the time that I go to a support group for bereaved siblings, and that's a great sentence that you can use if you ever need to get out of a conversation.
That is good.
Often followed by me being alone with my thoughts again. You're welcome. Yeah.
I love it. Humor is such a great creative expression.
Yes, it is.
I love this. Okay. So we're going to end there. I want to thank everybody. This was great. You all taught me a lot. And, we always say, if you've lost hope, please lean on all of ours until you find your own. And God bless.